All right, everybody. It says I am live. So if that's the case, please let me know in the chat. That way I can move forward and we can start discussing how our adversaries are getting ready for an attack. And we should probably be ready for it too. We're all here for being here. New here. This is what we do every week, just about. Sometimes I take a little vacation, but we need to discuss things that have happened over the past week and talk about what we should be preparing for in the future. So, 4x5 coming through, says Grisio Nemo. We've got DJ Touchstone is here. Mr. Landfill is here. Welcome to my life, says 5x5 ish, which I will take as a win because that's better than 4x4 ish, I guess. So, a lot of things are going on. Hey, Ken Conley, good to see you as well. Cowboy69 is here also. Awesome. So, nuclear adversaries, they're getting ready. And of course, everybody's getting ready. But with the frequency of drills and nuclear escalations happening within just the past week, we should definitely consider the fact that these world powers are definitely working together to move forward in a way that doesn't involve the Western homogeny. I like to just say things the way I do sometimes. So if you're here on the replay, thanks for being here as well. I appreciate y'all coming back the next day to kind of see what we're talking about. Let's talk about what happened first. And this is all relevant present information that just recently came out. And that's what we're discussing tonight. So we have North Korea stages a tactical nuclear attack drill and warning to enemies. Now, this happened on the 3rd of September, so just yesterday. Pyongyang says it carried out a simulated tactical nuclear attack drill with mock atomic warheads attached to 2 long-range cruise missiles. Now, North Korea is known for exaggerating and known for claiming victories where they truly had losses, but this is still important information to keep an eye on because North Korea is still the wild card when it comes to nuclear powers around the world, and their associations is honestly what should concern you the most. And we're going to talk about why here in just a minute, and everything we're discussing tonight is relevant to this week and shows you why so much is happening around the entire world, not just over in Eastern Europe. North Korea has announced that it conducted a simulated tactical nuclear attack drill with 2 long-range missiles equipped with mock atomic warheads. The KCNA news agency, in a report on Sunday, said the drill was carried out early on Saturday to warn enemies that the country could be prepared in case of a nuclear war and pledged again to bolster military deterrence against South Korea and the United States. The 2 cruise missiles carrying mock nuclear warheads were fired towards the West Sea off the peninsula and flew 1,500 kilometers at a preset altitude of 150 meters, it said. The launches were the latest in a series of missile tests and military exercises conducted by Pyongyang in recent weeks, including a failed spy satellite launch late last month. It came just after the joint annual summertime exercises between South Korea and the U.S., known as Ulchi Freedom Shield, came to a close on Thursday after an 11-day run featuring air drills with B-1B bombers. North Korea has long denounced the drills as a rehearsal for war, protested the deployment of U.S. strategic bombers by firing 2 ballistic missiles on Thursday. Okay, now, North Korea is known for doing this, but they're doing it more and more, and it does seem that they are increasing their capabilities, at least on a public scale. We don't necessarily know how everything works behind the backstage area, right? But we do know exactly what they're putting out there in the sense of media, and they are testing these weapons, and they are being provocative. So why is this a concern? Well, a lot of people agree that the Indo-Pacific region is actually a little bit more unstable than most other places around the world when it comes to the possibility of a nuclear attack. So I find that kind of interesting based on everything that's been going on recently. And it's not something that everybody would necessarily gravitate immediately towards, but this is the information that's coming out. This is what we need to discuss. So this came out on September 3rd from the Eurasian Times. Not Pakistan, Russia, or Iran. Indo-Pacific, the most probable venue for a nuclear attack. Experts. Now, understand that a lot of these media articles from other parts of the world are translated, and then things don't always add up. So I'll do my best to make it sound correct, but we'll just do what we do here, okay? Amid global concerns about Russia's potential use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, experts have warned that the Korean Peninsula is a more probable location for a nuclear conflict. So I just find that statement to be interesting based on what everybody seems to be the most concerned about. But I understand why they're saying this, but I also want you to be aware of the fact that Any event like this, no matter in what part of the world it takes place, will involve other countries to some degree and will probably be the catalyst of something much larger, no matter where or when it happens. So, this is why we have to keep an eye on all the different things that are happening in the world around us regarding this nuclear escalation. And these nuclear adversaries are 100% getting ready for an attack, if not just an all out war. And this is something that you should consider when you're preparing for yourself at home. What am I getting ready for? What's on the table when it comes to the threat analysis, and what else should I be thinking about when it comes to the preps that are going to be the most prioritized based on the current situation? And this is why I wanted to bring this information to you, just so you can understand just where we're at regarding this possibility. In a discussion with Eurasian Times, Shashank S. Patel, a geopolitical analyst who keenly monitors trends in East Asia, shared his observations concerning the potential for a nuclear conflict in the Korean Peninsula. Patel stated that the Korean Peninsula had been a potential location for nuclear conflict among major regional powers since World War II. The situation continues to the present day. Apart from the legacy issue, the North Korean leadership has strategic motives that drive their preference for nuclear capabilities. When questioned about the reasoning underlying his viewpoint, he detailed a range of factors that might potentially lead North Korea to contemplate using nuclear weapons. And this is something you should really think about, because you can apply some of this logic to other things that are happening in the world right now to understand why these weapons might be used, at least on a limited scale. Patel explained, the Korean Peninsula holds deep symbolic significance as the claimed territory of the rising sun by Kim Il-sung. Thus, it becomes a crucial objective for Kim Jong-un to reclaim the symbolic gem for the nation. Second, it provides immense regional political space and opportunities for the North to align with their neighbors such as China and Russia, which we will be talking about here very shortly. This trio itself represents the biggest anti-West bloc in the Eastern Hemisphere. New commonality joined them in a thread, Patel added. Keep that in mind as we move forward through the conversation tonight. A third point is that possessing nuclear capabilities aimed at South Korea grants North Korea a strategic advantage in East Asia. He noted, third, it served as a strategic asset for North Korea in the East Asian region to target their both enemies. See what I'm saying about the translation here? Japan and South Korea with a single shot. Nuke establishments towards South Korea will further push the South to employ the Camp David Agreement, making it a trilateral front. It directly opens doors for North to strategically include their immediate allies in war situations, making it a war of whole East Asia. So just understand that analysis points out the fact that even if North Korea goes off the rails and decides to have a limited engagement with South Korea, it immediately opens the door for Russia and China to be involved and for the U.S. to be involved, which then just creates an entire World War III scenario right then and there. And North Korea is probably, at least at this point in time, based on their unhinged process in many ways, very likely to use a nuclear weapon more so than possibly Russia or China. So this is why it should be something we're still paying attention to, even though it's not the hot topic issue right now based on everything else that's going on. Fourth, due to the usage of liquid fuels, North's ICBMs are still not that capable of penetrating West's anti-missile systems to hit far lands. Technically, bombarding multiple ballistics towards South, guarded by limited THAAD deployment, will suffice some positive results to them. So, this is something that needs to be kept in mind when we move forward through this conversation, that the North has these relationships and has the motivations to use these weapons that they've been developing and actually testing quite a bit. Now, their nuclear tests have been kept underground, and they haven't had one in recent history, but their ICBM tests are happening on a regular basis. And they're using cruise missiles and nuclear-capable missiles in order to test their systems and find out just how far they could go. So this is something that I'm keeping an eye on and that everybody else should be too. And everything we're talking about tonight is nicely puzzle pieced together in a linear order, so that way you know who's cooperating with who and why we should expect something to happen here, because they're all cooperating to a degree. And it's very interesting that over just the last 7 days, I've been able to establish this puzzle of everyone working together on being ready for this inevitable war that seems like it is on its way. And of course, yes, we're already in war. Of course, war is already happening, but there's a difference between all-out war and proxy war. And currently, at least publicly, we are in a proxy war. Whether or not that's what everyone actually thinks about is a different story, but we're not fully mobilized yet, and neither is the enemy. So these are things to consider while we move forward, but understanding just how far they're going to go is also part of the equation. Dan Cooper, I am acknowledging you, so don't worry. I see you, and I'm glad you're here. I am the cheese. HK is better than SIG. I mean, yeah, I mean, generally, but more expensive too. So, well, I guess not really. I mean, you can get an MR762 for cheaper than a SIG Spear now. So maybe you're right. Maybe they are just better. I don't know. Let's see here. We need to keep a closer eye on China. They're getting ready, are we? David Buys, we are going to talk about that because, like I said, everybody is talking and getting ready. So China is definitely not left off of that list. So what else is going on with North Korea? Well, Kim Jong-un is going to visit Putin in Russia for weapons talks, or at least that's what the U.S. says. Now, this is an interesting conversation because just to preface this, there's speculation that anytime Kim Jong-un's plans are revealed, that they tend to get canceled based on his paranoia around personal security, which I don't think is probably very paranoid, especially based on what happens to other people around the world when they make a lot of enemies. But at the same time, this is something that was caught onto by spy agencies. So it is possible that this could change, but this is what is supposedly in the works. So we know Russia and North Korea are working together. So like I said, if North Korea pushes that nuclear envelope into South Korean territory and opens that door to the Camp David Agreement, who do you think is going to come to their aid? Not just China anymore, okay? North Korea's Kim Jong-un plans to travel to Russia this month to meet President Vladimir Putin, a U.S. official has told the BBC's U.S. partner, CBS. The two leaders will discuss the possibility of North Korea providing Moscow with weapons to support its war in Ukraine, the official said. The exact location of the planned meeting is not clear. Mr. Kim is most likely to travel by armored train, sources told the New York Times. The possible meeting comes after the White House said it had new information that arms negotiations between the two countries are actively advancing. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that Russia's defense minister recently traveled to North Korea to try to convince Pyongyang to sell artillery ammunition to Russia. The weapons on display at the meeting included the Hwasong Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, ICBM. It was the first time Mr. Kim had opened the country's doors to foreign guests since the COVID pandemic. Mr. Putin and Mr. Kim have since exchanged letters pledging to increase their bilateral cooperation. Oh, and don't forget that Washington believes they can have an opinion on this, I guess. We urge the DPRK to cease its arms negotiations with Russia and abide by the public commitments that Pyongyang has made not to provide or sell arms to Russia, Mr. Kirby said, using an acronym for the North. He warned that the U.S. would take action, including imposing sanctions if North Korea does supply Russia with weapons, he said. The meeting could take place in the city of Vladivostok on the east coast of Russia, the New York Times reports. So first off, part of me, and this is just my speculation, right? So this is where I go down like that rabbit hole on occasion, but with the words being used, the semantics that are being put out there, and just the way that these situations are approached, right? Well, if they do this, and they better not, but if they do, sanctions are on their way, and Russia and North Korea are being pushed into each other's arms based on international sanctions and based on everything that we're doing economically to these countries and based on everything else that they've been excluded from due to their decisions when it comes to their military might. Well, suddenly we're creating these allies and also creating these red lines and these issues that they're obviously going to cross because of their relationship that then puts us in a position to move forward on actions in the future? I don't know, but that is just how some of these things line up to me, based on what we've seen happening over in Eastern Europe and everything else around the world when it comes to toppling regimes, right? So I have to look at it with a little bit of skepticism based on these scenarios. And in fact, once in a while, I just wonder if this information is being told to us specifically for those reasons, more so than the fact that it was revealed, right? And that's obviously the prepper side of me coming out, being a skeptic. How can you not be these days, right? Let's see here. You are in denial, says Pittsburgh is closing schools. Great. Love that. I'm sure no one's learned anything from last time around. But we all knew this was coming, didn't we? Forgiven Disciple, has anyone heard of Top Helmet Fan for ballistic bulletproof helmet? No, I haven't heard of that. But if anyone else has, please let them know in the chat so that way you can give them some information. Now, North Korea, Russia, they're working together, trying to arm each other, right? Well, Russia, speaking of them, recently deployed their Sarmat Satan II missile, which is something that we should all definitely be concerned about, just because of the fact that if it's in use now militarily, it has a possibility of being used. Whether or not it's likely doesn't really matter as much as the fact that this thing exists, and it's pretty insane what it's capable of. So this is from Times of India, September 2nd, 2 days ago. Russia deploys deadliest nuclear missiles. All you need to know about Sarmat ICBM, aka Satan II. In a major escalation of tensions in Europe, Russia has put on combat duty the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missiles that President Vladimir Putin once said would make the nation's enemies think twice. According to Sputnik News, the RS-28 Sarmat is Russia's next-generation intercontinental ballistic missile that is set to become the backbone of the country's silo-based strategic deterrent. And yes, these are silo-based missiles because of their enormous size, so they are not truck-mounted and they're not mobile in the same way as other nuclear missiles are that Russia currently possesses, or other intercontinental ballistic missiles. But regardless, that doesn't seem to really matter because of their capabilities, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. With its impressive range and destructive power, the Sarmat is considered one of the deadliest nuclear missiles in the world. The ballistic missile system is capable of carrying up to 15 nuclear warheads and is intended to replace the R-36 ICBMs that are known by the NATO reporting name of Satan. The Sarmat missiles are known by the NATO reporting name of Satan II. Now, one thing I want to mention is that there are reports coming from the U.S. saying that, we don't necessarily have reason to believe that it can actually carry 15 warheads. We believe it's actually closer to the number of 10. Now, I don't think that really matters. I don't think that matters to anyone who might be underneath one of these warheads. But for some reason, that's the information that the U.S. is putting out. So I'm not exactly sure what the goal there is, unless it's just factual and they just want to let us know that they lied about their capability. But 10 is still very bad. 15 is very bad as well, right? It doesn't make it a better system in the sense of safer for us because it's only 10. It's not 15. Relax. But according to Russia's capabilities as to what they're reporting, this missile could take out a place the size of Texas or the size of France. So this is a missile that could literally remove a country the size of France off of the map, or a state the size of Texas, which is pretty concerning because that's a pretty large landmass considering it only takes one of these missiles to be able to do that. With the war in Ukraine dragging on for over 18 months and Russian forces on the back foot amid a counteroffensive, which I guess that's some people's opinion, Putin has repeatedly went on national television and said that all options are on the table when it comes to safeguarding the motherland, and in a barely veiled reference to nuclear option. The silo-based Sarmat missile is one of several advanced weapons whose deployment or development Putin announced in 2018, including the Kinzhal and Avangard hypersonic missiles. The Russian Defense Ministry has said the missile is Moscow's response to the U.S. Prompt Global Strike System. Now, we know the Kinzhal has been intercepted before, I believe, by Patriot Defense Systems, and it is hypersonic, so that's interesting that that's kind of the information we learned from this current conflict, was that there are some countermeasures that seem to work in that regard. But the Sarmat, here's what makes it such a dangerous weapon system. The Sarmat reportedly has a short initial launch phase, allowing little time for surveillance systems to track it. And from what I understand, it is a short launch phase and it moves very quickly. The missile can reach speeds in excess of 12,000 miles per hour, which means it could potentially reach the farthest spots in Europe within 3 minutes. So if it launches quickly and it can reach its target in 3 minutes, what's the warning time on a launch like this? Because at least as of right now, based on conventional wisdom and what we operate under right now in the sense of being prepared for a nuclear strike here in the United States, it's always been around that 20-minute mark that you would have in order to take cover or whatever it is once you had the warning system take place. And that number has actually been cut down all the way down to 5 minutes, depending on what systems are being used and where they're being launched from, aka from the Arctic possibly, or of course off the coast via submarine. So it's 5 to 20 minutes, but this thing is supposedly able to launch very quickly and reach its target within 3 minutes, which means I don't know how much warning or if any warning there would be. And that is actually pretty insane. The Sarmat ICBM measures approximately 116 feet in length, weighs 220 tons, and can carry up to 15 light nuclear warheads at once, arranged as multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, meaning a single rocket can hit an array of targets at once. And in case you're not aware of how some of these missile systems work, yes, each warhead is on its own re-entry vehicle, which means this system could technically launch up and then deploy its 15 isolated warheads to hit 15 isolated targets, which means it doesn't have to take out a landmass the size of Texas. It means that it could just take out 15 smaller targets much more easily and probably have a better chance of success in the sense of not keeping everything so close together for countermeasures to be used. So this thing is intense. It has a range of up to 11,180 miles, which, I mean, yes, it's silo-based, so it can only reach certain areas where it needs to reach, but I mean, it can pretty much reach anywhere it needs to reach. And that is kind of a wild situation we have there. So Russia has that going on for them. Let's see here. Whoop, whoop. Lars Larson, I'm already assuming the largest nuke for that calculation go to any of those nuke mapping sites. The biggest nukes aren't that big destruction-wise. And that's true, and Lars Larson is right. If you go to like nukemap.com, I think it is, or something like that, like the largest nuke that they have is the Tsar Bomba 2, I believe, which was what the largest nuclear test that ever occurred over in the Soviet Union. And basically, that's a huge explosion, but we're talking like it's still not able to wipe a state off the map unless it's a state like Rhode Island or maybe Delaware, but a very small state. Otherwise, it's taking out a portion of a state, but nothing like that ginormous. But this thing supposedly is much bigger, and that nuke map, at least the one that I think you were talking about, doesn't have the option to go up to that level. So you can't actually see on the map how big that would actually be. That's just my experience with it. Maybe there's a better resource for that. Let's see here. Durgan, depth perception with the old nods was an issue. However, some movement is better than none. Yep. So regardless of what generation, any night vision is probably better than no night vision because it's about mobility. It's not just about being able to acquire a target. A lot of people misrepresent that in the sense of, well, I have a night vision scope on my rifle, so why do I need, night vision devices on a helmet or something like that? And it's because you want to be able to walk and move and operate under darkness without having to look through a rifle or a rifle optic, obviously. So Tyler says they're not using a nuke. They'd pay too high a price. Well, that depends. I mean, and I don't know. You don't know that as much as I don't know that, right? But we have to consider the fact that North Korea probably doesn't care that much about what the price is, especially knowing who their friends are, aka Russia and China. So I think that that's something that's made us feel good for a very long time. But I don't necessarily think that's where we're at anymore due to the current state of the world. And in fact, if you want to ask like the more, let's just call it rabbit hole side of me, I would assume there's people that are within our own government or within our own power structure that want these things to happen and are pushing for them to occur. So that's the other thing you have to keep in mind. It's not always they that are the problem, right? And sometimes they are pushed into a situation that they weren't aware of due to those who actually control some of the strings, right? So now let's also see why Russia is becoming a little bit scarier, not just because of having the Sarmat 2 deployed for military use, but publicly on their state media, they're constantly calling for the use of nuclear weapons. And I don't know how much of the dark corners of the internet you guys hang out in, because I know some of you do. I'm sure we don't want to look at your search history, but what I'm talking about is that if you spend some time researching via the Russian perception of what's happening over there, right? Because I try to get all perspectives and I try to read information from all sources. That's why you guys see me have like the India Times and Al Jazeera and all these other news agencies, because I just try to get that broad perspective and I try to figure out where some of this information is actually verifiable versus just being put a spin on it for ideological purposes, right? Well, if you go on these Russian media sites, the comments, right? The people who like live there, the people who are like part of this, like this push for, propaganda or whatever you want to call it. All they want is a nuclear strike. Like they're mad about the fact that nothing's been used yet. They're upset that this isn't over yet. And they're mad that this thing is dragging on for so long. They're like, look, if it's going to take this long, we got to just get it done and do the thing and be done with it, right? So it's very interesting how much push there is for this, and that's concerning because at a certain point, if we all really direly wanted something to happen from the government and our officials, are elected by us and serve we the people, which they don't right now, but, they're supposed to. How mad would you be if everyone in the country was like, do this thing, and then the government was like, no? So this is why it's concerning. A Kremlin propagandist has issued the latest nuclear threat against the West regarding the war in Ukraine, warning that the U.S. could be in danger of a Russian missile attack. And by the way, this story is from today. So keep this in mind. This is people pushing this stuff like right now. Igor Korodichenko, editor of the newspaper National Defense and a regular guest on the Russia One channel, where guests have repeatedly called for strikes against Ukraine's allies, took exception to criticism of Russian conduct in the war. Russia's being warned and threatened that if we misbehave or if in NATO, Ben Hodges' opinion, we exceed what he considers to be the necessary permissible lines for the use of all types of Russian weapons. He threatens us with more than just strikes on the Crimean bridge, Korotchenko said. Hodges has repeatedly called for Ukraine to be provided with all the weapons it needs to retake Crimea, such as ATACMS, Army Tactical Missile Systems, which would allow long-range precision strikes on the peninsula Moscow annexed in 2014. So keep in mind, we're not just trying to defend Ukraine anymore. We have people within NATO and people within the defense industry who are pushing for an actual offense in the sense of regaining Crimea, not just regaining the lost territory of the Donbass at this point, which Russia has repeatedly said that Crimea is Russia, which means an attack on Crimea is an attack on Russia, not Ukraine. So this thing is getting a little bit out of control, as we all know, but this is important for us to kind of pay attention to based on these nuclear threats, not just the idea of like what happens directly there in Ukraine, but how this affects other countries outside. Korotchenko said that Hodges believed the U.S. might consider strikes on the bases of Russia's Black Sea Fleet and troops in Crimea, as well as strike Russian naval bases in Tartus, Syria. Korotchenko believed these were not just statements of a retired hawk, but also a concerted information campaign designed to influence both us and a Western audience. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. This guy is a propagandist, but the other guy is not labeled as one. But they both are in many ways. And obviously, people are easily influenced by these industry experts, right? And in this case, the industry is a military-industrial complex. So keep in mind that both sides are pushing a narrative in order to get public support, not necessarily to just get what they want. They have to influence public opinion in order to get those who are in charge of pulling the lever to finally do it. While the U.S. is the biggest provider of military aid to Ukraine, it has taken pains to avoid direct confrontation with Russia and has made no threats of attacking the targets that Korotchenko referred to. But Korotchenko said there should be a decision about what will determine the use and permissibility of tactical nuclear weapons, what goals and what tactics we will use. The most important message we should send to the Americans is that we will not wage war with you in Europe, he said in a clip subsequently posted on X by Ukrainian Internal Affairs advisor Anton Gerashenko. In response to your attacks on Russian military or civilian facilities, the first strike will be a preventative, limited strike against targets on the territory of the United States of America, he told the anchor of 60 Minutes, Yevgeny Popov, last week. Russia announced that its Sarmat strategic missile system, which can reach the U.S., had been put on combat duty. Attention, United States, wrote Gerashenko next to the video. Russian propagandists threatened with nuclear strikes on U.S. territory. In response to Korotchenko's comments, Hodges told Newsweek that the U.S. administration was finally realizing that the likelihood of Russia using a nuclear weapon is extremely small. Russia had been threatening nuclear strikes since the beginning. I take them seriously because Russia has thousands of nuclear weapons and because they clearly don't care how many innocent people may die. But I think they realize that their nukes are actually most effective when they don't use them. They see how we self-deter. That's coming from the standpoint of somebody who's in NATO, not someone from Russia. So keep that in mind. And like I said, both of them are pushing a level of propaganda to sway public opinion. Crimea is the decisive terrain of this war, said Hodges of the peninsula, which has seen a stepping up of attacks believed to be carried out by Kiev, including the Kerch Bridge that links the occupied territory with Russian mainland. Once Ukraine liberates Crimea, it is over. Ukraine knows they cannot ever be safe or secure or rebuild their economy as long as Russia occupies Crimea. Does that make you think they're going to let Crimea go? Of course not. So this is concerning. This is coming from state media. This is coming from our representatives as well, Ben Hodges, at least for NATO. So this is a very decisive situation when it comes to public support for nuclear weapons use coming from Russia. And obviously, I think that their government is concerned about the idea of it because it leads us down a terrible path. Everyone knows it. It's not something that anyone should be taking lightly. But the people, the public, are less invested and less concerned, and they just don't want their lives to be affected negatively anymore. And a lot of us feel the same way here in the U.S. Most people would prefer that you rip the Band-Aid off, right? And that leads to a very scary scenario. So I think that's a lot of what we're seeing, and it's definitely concerning. Sorry I sipped the coffee so loud. I did not mean to do that. Rip Curl Readiness, thank you so much for being here and modding tonight. I appreciate it. Savage Lee is here. We got Jimmy of the Sea. We also have Jimbo Alago, and we have DAFT agent 6969. Well, I'm glad you're here so you can kind of make sure I don't have any crazy braces laying around in this live stream or anything, right? So let's see here. One more thing coming from Russia. Remember how I said everybody's starting to work together and getting ready to attack, not just defend themselves, but I honestly believe that these countries around the world are trying to remove themselves from the grips of, Western society when it comes to how the global economy has been crafted over the last 100 years or so. And unfortunately, they're teaming up to the degree that it should be pretty concerning because they have capabilities, they have weapons, they have large militaries, and they have, in many ways, sometimes less to lose, right? Russia proposes joint naval drill with China and North Korea. This is from today. All this information is coming out right now. This is why it's so relevant to pay attention to these things, because it's crazy how much is happening in such a short amount of time. Defense chief raised the idea to the North in his recent visit, said South Korean spies. Russia has formally proposed to China and North Korea for a joint naval drill in July, South Korea's spy said on Monday, a move that could further escalate tensions in East Asia. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has made an official proposal for a trilateral naval drill to Kim Jong-un when he visited North Korea. Yu Sang-byum, a lawmaker who was briefed by the nation's spy agency in the National Assembly, told reporters. The assessment by South Korea's National Intelligence Service followed Shoigu's visit to Pyongyang 2 months ago, which has raised suspicions that the two nations were looking to enhance their military cooperation, including arms trading that would support Russia's war with Ukraine. Washington issued a stern warning against North Korea last month regarding weapons transactions with Russia. The White House's national security spokesperson, John Kirby, said the U.S. was concerned about potential arms deals between Russia and North Korea. See, we're doing this all again. Stern warnings from Washington, right? But what I want to kind of remind everybody of when we started this conversation tonight, we were talking about North Korea and their military drills, and then we were talking about the fact that they know if they were to start a conflict in South Korea, that it would create a scenario that would immediately involve their allies, aka Russia and China. And now we have Russia saying, hey, we need to start doing military drills together. So these things aren't coincidental. This is all part of a larger plan that people like myself here on the ground might not be as privy to in the sense of having all the details and information. But we can take all these different pieces of this equation, put them together, and understand exactly what it is we're looking at in the end results. And to me, that's a pretty substantial situation that we have on our hands. South Korean spies also saw North Korea's missile launch Saturday as a response to the U.S.-South Korea joint drill, according to Yu, hinting that authoritarian regimes around the world are seeking their own ways to counter military ties among democracies. That's kind of the big one that you need to take away from this conversation in this article. They are trying to build their own NATO around the world. And of course, Russia already has a very NATO-like alliance with many other countries within its region. But now we're talking about superpowers. We're talking about China. And North Korea, although they're not a superpower by any means because of their economy and everything else related to any type of growth and domestic product production, but they have the largest military, and they also have nothing to lose. So keep that in mind, and they are nuclear armed. So one thing I also thought was interesting in this article, it seems clear that they are thinking of a short-term war, if there is any, merging their conventional arsenal with tactical nuclear weapons, Yu said, citing the assessment of South Korea's spy agency. He said the intelligence agents have emphasized North Korea's inability to wage a long-term war as the hermits stay strapped by an ongoing economic crisis. So keep that in mind, because that's another scenario that forces some of these countries to actually go to the level of using nuclear weapons when they don't have the ability to wage a war of attrition like we're seeing Russia do right now in Ukraine, like the United States has done for years in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. They can't afford attrition. Attrition is a difficult game to play and a difficult game to win, no matter which side of the equation you're on, because so many unknown factors occur during any kind of long-term conflict that something could happen all of a sudden and you no longer can afford to keep that war going. So they can't afford it, which means they're going to do whatever they have to do to get things done quickly. And for them to get things done quickly means bombarding Seoul with all the artillery they have access to, while probably using tactical nuclear strikes to deter any type of response from the U.S. military and the South Korean military, which we have, a joint force there, right there on the DMZ. So these are all things to keep in mind, and this is why all this stuff is becoming so wild, and that's, like I said, this is just this week, like I know I don't always hammer down on the World War III talk or the nuclear arsenal talk or any of that kind of stuff, but I think it's important for us to kind of go back every so often and say, hey, by the way, this is where we're at now, and this is kind of getting a little bit sketchy, especially in regards to all these people working together. Now, speaking of working together, I'll mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. They work with me when it comes to supporting everything I try to do here, especially when it comes to, I don't know, like outfitting a new AK that just fell into my lap. So big thanks to Midway USA for always helping me out. And then I do want to mention that right now, MIRA Safety has a Labor Day deal that, I don't know, probably ends today. So just be aware of that. But I'm going to put a link in the chat, because if you guys are worried about this nuclear stuff and you want to have some CBRN protection, okay, oh, that was a article about the SARMAT, actually. Give me 1 second here. But all I know is that they have all this stuff ready to go in the sense of a nuclear strike. And so I want to have some level of protection for it, okay? So here you go. This is the link that will get you to MIRA if you want to support the channel simultaneously. And you can use my code, which is MAGIC10, to get 10% off. Or you can literally get 20% off right now for Labor Day. So honestly, use their code. But if you use my link, it helps me out. So I appreciate it. But I think it's a good idea to pick something up now while it's 20% off. Because honestly, these gas masks, like, they're nice, they're legit. And this is the CM7M. And this is the one I would probably pick up because you can shoot with it really easily. They also put out the 8M recently that has a lot of the same features that allow you to get behind a scope and use it in the sense of shouldering a rifle without having a terrible cheek weld. So I like their stuff because they do consider the idea of having to use firearms while wearing a gas mask. So just my 2 cents, but I would just check that out if that's something you're lacking in right now, based on everything that we're talking about tonight and based on the fact that a nuclear entanglement of sorts is becoming more likely every single day. I mean, until this war is over and until everybody chills out around the world, nuclear engagements are becoming more and more likely, which means that they're just going to eventually happen, I guess, because I don't see anybody chilling out. I don't see the U.S. deciding to just back off of anybody that's around the world right now in the sense of being the world's police. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, be ready for it. Whatever that might mean for you. You got to dig a hole. You got to dig a hole. I mean, I might need to dig a hole too. Don't get me wrong. What else is going on? Well, we just got done talking about China, North Korea, and Russia having drills together. So what's China doing? Because they're a huge threat. They're a nuclear power. And guess what else China is? Probably our number one adversary when it comes to economically and militarily. Why militarily, you say? Because they've put all the footwork in, the groundwork, right? They have boots on the ground here in the country. They have cyber weapons within our computer systems and our networks and our infrastructure. And they also have, connections with cartels and everybody else that has access to our country and access to the levels of funding required in order to, I don't know, run some type of faux insurgency. You call it whatever you want, but they are a huge threat to us, and they are getting ready for this war as well. PLA holds extensive nonstop anti-submarine drill in South China Sea. This is from August 30th. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. The U.S., a huge part of our nuclear triad is our submarine force, right? Because we can launch nuclear warheads from submarines, which allows us to get closer, which allows less detection in the sense of how quickly they deploy, which allows us to get to the target faster and hopefully not be countered in the process. So they're getting ready for that. I mean, yes, they have the world's largest naval fleet at this point, but they're not worried about submarines blowing up their boats. They're worried about submarines launching nuclear missiles, right? So PLA recently conducted an anti-submarine exercise that stretched for more than 40 hours and featured more than a dozen groups of anti-submarine patrol aircraft in the South China Sea, which is a region experts said is infested with foreign submarine activities that potentially threaten China's national defense. A naval aviation regiment and a submarine detachment affiliated with the PLA, Southern Theater Command, recently conducted a long-endurance, nonstop exercise on searching and attacking submarines in the South China Sea, the PLA Southern Theater Command said in a press release on Tuesday. During the exercise that examined the crew's skills and tactical capabilities, Y-8 anti-submarine patrol aircraft carried out searching, identifying, attacking, and tracking of submarines under single or multiple known variables, according to the press release. The exercise presented a combat scenario in which the anti-submarine patrol aircraft and submarines confronted each other in a realistic manner. By focusing on multiple time periods, including small hours and daybreak, the crews were able to garner more experience in dealing with hydrological and geographic environments in water at different times of the day. gather combat data, and hone the force's all-weather aviation anti-submarine warfare capabilities, the PLA Southern Theater Command said. Anti-submarine warfare is a very challenging task, and such an extensive, non-stop search is a common practice to find submarines hidden in the vast sea, Song Zhongping, a Chinese military expert and TV commentator, told the Global Times on Wednesday. So understand that they're getting ready just the same way as we are when it comes to not only offensive capabilities, but defensive capabilities. And as we all know, especially when it comes to the sports world, a good defense beats a good offense at times, right? Well, sometimes your defense is the offense. And removing a counter attack from the equation means that you can attack more freely. So sometimes these things have to be structured in a way that allows for those nuclear strikes to occur without the counterstrike actually happening. And that's something that I think we heavily invest in, and I'm sure we're very capable of. But obviously, China's working on their own version of that as well. As an example, exposing intensive submarine activities in the South China Sea is the U.S. Navy's Seawolf-class nuclear-powered attack submarine, the USS Connecticut's collision with a seamount in the South China Sea in October of 2021. These things happen. These submarines are there, and obviously very publicly, because we have accidents sometimes. So now China's doing that, but remember how I talked about everybody around the world kind of gearing up to not only have an attack, but team up against the West, right? It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Well, who else is teaming up? Here's a strange one. Strange bedfellows, you might say. I think that this is something to keep in mind. We generally have a good relationship with India. However, India Air Force to carry out mega military drill with China and Pakistan near borders, which, by the way, started today. Now, here's something I find interesting. India and China are still in a border dispute. And in fact, they have such issues with each other that Xi Jinping is skipping the G20 summit because it's being held in India. And likely it's because of some of these geopolitical tensions that China has with India. However, that's not stopping them from conducting a tri-nuclear force drill, because Pakistan is nuclear capable, India is nuclear capable, and China is nuclear capable. So all three of these nuclear capable countries are getting together and having a mega military drill. Ahead of the G20 summit scheduled to be held in New Delhi, the Indian Air Force has announced to hold a major training exercise codenamed Trushul. Interestingly, the drills will be carried out in the northern sector along the borders of China and Pakistan, which, like I said, there are disputes about. According to ANI, the exercise will be a grand event that will witness the participation of major fleets of fighter aircraft, including the Rafale, Mirage 2000, and the Su-30 MKIs. Or is that Mark 1s? I'm not sure. Heavy lift transported aircraft and choppers, including the Chinooks and Apache, will also take part in the military drills. Garud Special Forces are also part of the drills, where all elements of air power are likely to be exercised. All elements of air power. When will it take place? From September 4th to the 14th, overlapping with the G20 summit slated to be held from the 9th to the 10th. The training drills will be held in the northern sector, including Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu, and Kashmir, and Punjab. Terang Shakti, I guess. The latest announcement comes as the IAF plans to carry out a multilateral exercise called Terang Shakti in October-November. This will also see participation of fighter jets, military transport aircraft, mid-air refuelers, and airborne warning and control system aircraft. A total of all 6 air forces will participate in the event, while several others will take part as observers. The air forces of the US, the UK, France, and Australia are among those likely to take part in the exercise. Isn't this interesting? The Indian Air Force earlier took part in the Ionios exercise hosted by the Hellenic Air Force at the Andravida base in Greece. So India is a strange bird because they are flying with a lot of interesting guests, aren't they? But this is what really concerns me. First off, they don't generally get along with Pakistan. They don't get along with China. And yet they're carrying out a mega military drill with both of them along the disputed border because it's in their best interests, especially with the BRICS nations coming together in order to establish their own dominance in the sense of an international currency. This is telling for the times if you were to ask me. Now, there are some other issues happening in the world. And I'm a little bit, let's just say, feeling like a little bit of a provocateur here when it comes to the way that we are interacting with these countries and the way that we are pushing for something to actually occur here. And it will concern you when you actually get to the final part of this equation, which I guarantee we will make it to. Now, really quick, let's see here. We've got Feder Lumpkin says, was that Klingon? Yes, everything I said was Klingon. Let's see here. Kill It and Grill It says, dang, nice setup, Rip. I don't know what you're talking about, but I do know that Rip Curl has a lot of good stuff going on. Oh, you got an ALG trigger. Yep. The one I just suddenly acquired, it just appeared out of thin air, also has an ALG trigger, which was very exciting to find out once it arrived. And I am looking at the KNS adjustable piston as well for suppressing it in the future. Now, you guys know what's happening in the Middle East, right? So enemies preparing, nuclear capabilities. Everybody wants to go to war. I think we know that the industrial complex is really hard at it right now. Oh, and by the way, if you watched any of the Republican debate, how many of the people on that debate stage were legitimate war hawks? You tell me. But there's a lot of interesting funds that are suddenly showing up regarding certain candidates that would, make you question whether or not they want peace and harmony for everybody, considering a large portion of their funding might come from companies like Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or, Boeing. Who knows? Anyway, UN Nuclear Agency reports with regret, that there's no progress in monitoring Iran's growing enrichment program. Oh, wait, Iran is still trying to get nuclear weapons? Yes. Now, before I get into this article, I just want to say one thing. If a country has science and their science develops the next logical steps in weapon systems or technology or anything, that is what that country does. So I do find it interestingly hypocritical or odd that we decide whether or not a country can move forward scientifically to a certain degree. I understand the dangers of Iran having nuclear weapons. I get all of that, right? But I also think to simplify it into a layman conversation, it very much feels like gun control, right? Yeah, we're allowed to have all this stuff, but like you guys, you're not capable of that. And we can't trust you. So I just find it strange. Don't get me wrong. If a country has the ability to scientifically develop something, they should probably just be able to do that because they're going to regardless of what you say. But I do find it interesting that we feel we can just control whether or not a country actually gets to do that. I'm just throwing that out there. Not that I'm a fan of Iran in any way, shape, or form, but I just wanted to state that because I wouldn't want any other country telling the U.S. we weren't allowed to develop something similar to what they were capable of either. United Nations, no progress. That's the United Nations Nuclear Watchdog Agency's latest assessment of international efforts to monitor and verify Iran's nuclear program. This article came out today, or was updated today. The global body's work stemming from the now defunct 2015 Iran nuclear deal related to verification and monitoring has been seriously affected by Iran's decision to stop implementing its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA. The still unpublished quarterly reports obtained by CBS News on Iran's nuclear advancement said the situation was exacerbated by Iran's subsequent decision to remove all of the agency's JCPOA-related surveillance and monitoring equipment. Really? They actually removed the monitoring and surveillance equipment that you guys put there saying they had to have? Of course they did. Why is this even a conversation? Now, this part is obvious. We knew this was going to happen. Okay. So yeah, they're going to keep developing nuclear weapons and nuclear power under whatever guise they decide to develop it under. But the real problem here is our reaction to it. Okay. Grisio Nemo, not looking for some new boots, but I'm always looking at boots because I have to. I got to have a good stockpile of boots because you can't walk into the store anywhere nearby me and actually pick up a size 15 pair of anything. So Tyler, $5. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Now, why is this an issue? Well, what do we do over there? You know what we do over there. Okay. Israel, U.S. to conduct drills simulating attack on Iran nuclear facilities. August 31st, this came out. The Israeli military will conduct a series of joint exercises with the U.S., including a simulation of a potential attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. Citing an unnamed source, Jerusalem's Channel 12 reported earlier this week that the U.S. military will bring a large number of Patriot missiles and other interceptors for the exercise. Another drill will reportedly practice Israel's response to a multi-front missile attack. The joint exercises are set to begin in the coming months. When asked for comment, the Israeli Defense Forces declined to provide specifics, but said the country and the U.S. regularly conduct joint military drills. Iran nuclear threat. Real quick, this is why this is important, because what we're going to talk about next will tell you why this is a big issue in the sense of a global problem. Israel has been under increasing nuclear threats from arch-foe Iran, which is reportedly close to testing a nuclear weapon for the first time. European intelligence reports claim that Tehran has been ramping up the development of highly enriched uranium necessary for making nuclear weapons. Because of the threats, Jerusalem laid out operational plans to neutralize the controversial nuclear program, including initiating a preemptive strike on its key facilities. Keep that in mind, a preemptive strike. Now, why is this worthy of global conflict? Why is this problematic based on all the things we already discussed tonight and all of the adversaries that we're discussing? Because we have our nuclear adversaries. We got China, we've got Russia, we've got North Korea, and obviously we talked about people who aren't necessarily our adversaries, India, Pakistan, countries over there, which, are nuclear capable, not technically enemies, but working with our adversaries on military drills and getting ready for whatever the future brings. So why is this Iran issue such an issue? Because it feels very localized and isolated to Israel and Iran, right? Or at least in that general area. Well, it's because Iran is ready to also jump into the team sports endeavor. When I say that, what I mean is this came out today. Iran is ready to hold joint air defense drills with friendly states. Who are their friendly states? Well, I can tell you they have been supplying Russia with quite a large amount of drones ever since the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. A top commander expressed the Iranian air defense's readiness to hold joint military exercises with friendly states and allies. This is because we are literally drilling and training to strike them and to destroy their nuclear capabilities before they have them. So they are now saying that we are ready to hold joint military exercises with friendly states and allies. Who are those states and allies? Well, BRICS nations, I would surmise, not to mention the fact that Russia and them have a great relationship when it comes to arms and military deals. And we also know that China is more than happy to work with Iran as well. So if this whole thing goes down with the US and Israel, and we actually preemptively strike their nuclear capabilities, they are now going to be training with countries like Russia and China in order to stop said strike. And this is where things become very complicated on an international level. In comments in a meeting with the foreign military attaches residing in Iran, Commander of the Iranian Army's Air Defense Force, Brigadier General Ali Reza Sabahifard, I'm sorry, said the Islamic Republic's message for the allied and friendly countries is peace and friendship. I try my best to say the names as I can read them, but sometimes they do stumble me a little bit. The Iranian air defense is prepared to promote military cooperation with the allied states in various fields, such as training, the exchange of technical and operational experiences, and holding joint war games, he added. Stressing the need to broaden constructive interaction and exchange technical know-how with the friends and allies, General Sabahifard said the Iranian air defense has fully ensured the security of the country's airspace. Iran's defense doctrine is based upon friendly and mutual relations with all world countries, specifically the friendly and neighboring states in West Asia, he underlined. Pointing to the development of advanced homegrown military equipment, the commander said Iran does not need any unconventional arms or weapons of mass destruction, which have no place in the country's defense doctrine. In remarks in 2018, leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, described the air defense base as a very crucial part of the armed forces that is at the front line of confronting enemies of Iran. The leader also stressed the importance of accelerating the capabilities of the base and the Air Force's staff. So, do you think Iran was maybe feeling left out from all these military drills that are happening around the world? Do you think that they might not actually need nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction like they claim, especially if they have friends like Russia? Do they really need their own nuke if Russia and them are already buddy-buddy in the sense of exchanging arms? I don't necessarily think so either. So is this preemptive strike that Israel and the U.S. is putting together actually necessary? Possibly. I don't have that level of data or intelligence. But what I do know is that I don't think Iran being nuclear armed is a good idea. But I don't necessarily think that they should be forced to comply with anybody else's crap because that's how countries work. They're supposed to be sovereign. Every country should be able to develop whatever they want. And if they use it, then things get really bad. But I don't know. I just find it kind of odd that everyone thinks they have a say on what another country does. And that's, I guess, me coming from the standpoint of being an American who doesn't want other countries to tell me what I can and can't do, right? I don't want the UN to come here and say that we're not allowed to have assault weapons anymore because they're dangerous, right? I'm not going to take that. So I kind of understand why this is a big deal for those who might feel like this is a little bit ridiculous. But the other side of it is that, yes, they have said many times before that they want death to America and that they want to destroy Israel. So I understand completely why the preemptive measures exist and why they might need to exist. But that's why I'm just some guy. I'm not a military analyst. I don't work for the federal government or any of the national security apparatuses. I'm just reading the information that I can have access to. I'm trying to apply it to my level of preparedness, and I'm trying to understand our timeline of critical threats in order to be more ready for them when they develop. So hopefully that gives everybody something to consider. I want all of you to be as prepared for this as possible, which is why we have to have these conversations. Everything we talked about tonight was in the last 7 days. That's a lot of things to be happening within 7 days. They are getting ready for an attack, not just war, but like an actual attack. Somebody's going to attack somebody. And it might even be us, because technically we're getting ready for an attack with Israel right now when it comes to preemptively striking Iran. So regardless of who's at fault and regardless of where this attack comes from, it's coming. And when that attack happens, how will the world respond? And that's exactly what I'm concerned about, because at the bare minimum, it's going to disrupt global trade, supply chains, and the economy, which doesn't really need any more disruption. And at the maximum, it's going to literally change our DNA on a molecular level. So I'm not a big fan of any of those things, but this is where we are. Goofy Roofy, you missed a few streams in August and you like the new set. Well, I appreciate that. I relocated where I was live streaming from before in order to accommodate my family a little bit better. And I actually like it. I think it turned out pretty well. And we have good lighting and I have more space. So thank you very much for the compliment there. Wolfpack, I've become comfortably numb. That is a problem. You might be listening to too much Pink Floyd, but you also need to snap out of it a little bit. Don't be comfortably numb to the bombastic news cycle, because that's very much what it is. And hopefully you guys understand that this broadcast wasn't meant to be bombastic in any manner. This is just meant to share relevant information that's happening right now. And I try to do it in a live format as a conversation in order to avoid such a repetitive notion as to like this large scale global threat. I could talk about it every day in a standalone video format, but I don't think that's as productive as having this conversation in a weekly format. And then also going back to like solutions rather than problems, right? So I try my best to balance it, and I appreciate everybody for being understanding in that regard. You guys here in the chat are amazing. I appreciate every single one of you. Jay Gobelos, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Carmen Jean, we've got DJ, huge fan. Thank you so much. And Carmen Jean says Trump 2024. There's a lot going on in the world, and we'll find out how next year looks. But man, if they want to keep raising his poll numbers, I guess just keep indicting him, right? Whatever you want to do there. Let's see. We got DJ says you love anything and everything I post. Well, I you know what? I don't even love anything and everything I post, so I appreciate that. But make sure you always second guess some of the things I say, and make sure you always check other references too, because I can get things wrong and I can also be incorrect in my opinions. For example, on my SHTF GP rifle video, I was slightly misled on some of the components, aka the barrel life factor of stainless steel 416R that's precision button cut for rifling versus something like a cold hammer forged barrel and being chrome lined. So I had some issues there. I also was mistaken about nickel boron bolt carrier groups compared to something like a nitride because of issues they have over time when it comes to the finish wearing off. So a lot of things I learned, which I'll be posting about as well, because I do actually take feedback from the audience and apply it to improving. And also, I do want to go ahead and mention, if you guys want to hang out after this stream, I do the members only, which is for YouTube channel members. So you can hit that join button below the stream and be able to jump on that if that's something you want to do. And then I also do it for Subscribe Star members. And if you're part of the Subscribe Star, which if you want to join that, it's $5 a month. But there are incentives, like we communicate, we have a good time over there. I do produce exclusive video content for that as well. But Midway USA actually just stepped it up, and they are going to start giving out preparedness incentives for Subscribe Star members. So this is one of their really nice range bags, which will be a preparedness incentive for the month of August. And in fact, while I've got everybody here, I'm just going to go ahead and announce which Subscribe Star member is going to be getting that range bag, because we all talked about that earlier today, actually. Or that was yesterday. I don't know what day of the week it is anymore. But that range bag in particular is going to be going to Tom Stubbs. So if you're Tom Stubbs on Subscribe Star, I'm sending that over to you. Make sure you get a hold of me on Subscribe Star. Send me a message, and I will send that out to you ASAP. And you'll get a nice range bag out of the deal. And a big thanks to Midway USA for supporting the Subscribe Star now too, because that's really cool. Actually, I'm not sure why they keep helping me out with more and more stuff, but I appreciate it very much. So, all right. So, listen, all of you are amazing. We're gonna call it a night. I got to get freshened up for the members only live stream. But these are things I want everyone to keep in mind when it comes to all the stuff we've been preparing for. You should have a nuclear survival plan figured out. You should have some handbooks and some guides as to how to respond to a nuclear attack. And you should understand where you are located regarding nuclear fallout and regarding even nuclear targets. I'm very close to some nuclear targets. I understand that. So I understand the level of priority for me to have plans in place to deal with that situation. And I also understand where those strike zones are and how they work in the sense of the prevailing winds and fallout coming my way. So luckily, I found myself in a relatively decent little nook of safety, but it is possible that it could be compromised anyway. So I'm doing my best to get ready for that. But if any of you need anything from me, you guys know where to go. We got Jordan Bay said last Saturday I went surf fishing just north of Port Hueneme to practice fishing preps, caught my limit in surf perch and a 4-pound corbina. Good for you. Good exercise, and also smart to brush up on your skills of acquiring food, because you know what? Fishing might be where it's at after a certain point. Who knows? But either way, thank you guys so much. MagicPrepper.com if you need anything else from me there. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.